The morning sun had barely brushed the rooftops of Austin, Texas, when Dr. Emily Harper laced up her running shoes. The air was still thick with summer humidity, a faint heat pressing against her skin even before the sun fully rose. Her two German shepherds, Titan and Nova, sat obediently at her side, eyes alert, muscles coiled like springs. Emily tightened the tactical leashes, a habit from 14 years commanding military working dogs in active duty zones. She had left the army with more than a limp from a combat injury. She carried the discipline and sharp instincts that had been honed in the chaos of conflict. Today, like most mornings, she ran the same route through the quiet streets of Cloverwood, appreciating the stillness she had carefully chosen when relocating with her son Lucas. He had insisted on feeding the dogs each morning. At 10 years old, Lucas had a sense of responsibility beyond his age, carrying the bowls to the porch with the care of someone who understood the gravity of service. Emily watched him with a mixture of pride and concern, recognizing the reflection of her own younger self in him. The morning moved with its usual rhythm until the back corner of her block revealed an unexpected obstacle. Two police cruisers angled across the parking area, blocking her path completely. Her pace slowed instinctively. The dogs mirrored her caution, their trained instincts recognizing the subtle tension in the air. Sergeant Harlan Voss stepped forward, hand resting on his radio, eyes narrowing at Emily. His posture radiated authority, a man used to commanding situations but unaware of the forces he was about to provoke. He barked an order about aggressive dogs, entirely ignoring Emily's calm assertion that the animals were federally certified retired military working dogs. Every step he took forward tightened the invisible box around her. Emily's mind calculated escape routes, options, contingencies, a lifetime of discipline compressed into moments of silent assessment. The dogs reacted before her words, moving forward with a precision born of countless missions, forming a protective wall between her and the approaching officers. The world seemed to pause, neighbors peering from porches, cameras from cell phones catching the unfolding standoff. The officers froze, unprepared for the living, breathing embodiment of trained service between them and Emily. She commanded quietly, and the dogs returned to her side, obedient and watchful, demonstrating control that contrasted sharply with the escalating tension around them. Sergeant Voss, caught between protocol and the unexpected, stumbled back, the authority he wielded rendered momentarily irrelevant. Emily, calm and measured, requested documentation, legal proof and evidence, every word deliberate, unflinching. The officers remained still, caught in a tableau of restraint and power, while Emily's mind already moved forward, considering the steps she would take to protect her son, her home and her dogs. In the silence, the weight of past missions, training, and lived experience pressed down, yet she remained poised, aware that every decision, every movement, would ripple outward, affecting more than just this single confrontation. It was not just about the dogs, or the officers, or even the immediate threat. It was about standing firm in a world that too often expected compliance instead of courage. And in that instant, the stakes became clear. The outcome would define not only Emily's present, but the safety and integrity of everything she had fought to protect. A subtle shift in the air, a fleeting glance from her son, and Emily understood that this morning would not end quietly. Something larger, more insidious was already in motion, and she would need every ounce of her training and resolve to navigate what came next. Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket as she led Titan and Nova back toward the house. She didn't answer immediately. Lucas was on the porch, holding his tablet like a soldier reporting from the front lines, eyes wide but steady. He had recorded the entire encounter, instinctively knowing that some things were worth remembering, worth proving. Emily clipped the leashes short and stepped inside, closing the door behind her, the quiet of her kitchen a fragile sanctuary. She dialed Quinn Donovan, her attorney, and delivered a calm, precise recounting of every detail. The location, the words exchanged, the timing, and the demeanor of Sergeant Voss. No emotion, only facts. Quinn listened, silent, calculating, then instructed her to secure every recording from Lucas and their neighbor, Mrs. Vivian Hale. Vivian, 71, had already documented the standoff from her front window. She had lived in the neighborhood over 30 years and seen patterns emerge that no one else noticed. Emily uploaded the footage to a shared drive, labeling every clip meticulously. preparing for the legal battle she knew was coming. By midday, the videos were public. Social media exploded. The headlines screamed across local news outlets. Army vet and military dogs stand their ground in Austin neighborhood. Emily watched the views climb, thousands sharing, commenting, debating. Lucas sat beside her on the couch, Titan leaning against his legs, Nova resting nearby. He didn't fully grasp the scale, but he felt the pulse of something larger. The support of strangers rallying around his mother. Emily felt it too, a mixture of relief and anticipation, knowing this attention would draw more scrutiny, more challenges. That afternoon, a formal civil suit arrived. $500,000 in damages claimed, permanent seizure, and even euthanization of Titan and Nova threatened. Councilman Victor Keller had retained the city's top civil litigator to back Voss. Emily's heart sank briefly, then steadied. She had trained for situations that tested every instinct. She had survived deployments, hostile environments, life and death decisions, and she would survive this. She outlined the defense with Quinn and contacted civil rights attorney Celine Kane, a sharp, relentless force with a history of winning against institutional abuse. Together, they began building a case that intertwined federal protections, military records, eyewitness testimonies, and documented patterns of Voss's behavior. Emily walked the neighborhood slowly with the dogs, neighbors nodding and waving, the ordinary rhythm of life grounding her. She paused at the intersection where the standoff had happened, absorbing the memory, reinforcing her resolve. Each step, each breath, a quiet affirmation that she would not yield. Over the next 24 hours, legal filings moved swiftly. Injunctions, emergency motions, discovery requests. Emily reviewed every detail, cross-referencing, ensuring that nothing could be misrepresented or omitted. Each hour brought new information, past complaints, hidden recordings, evidence of deliberate targeting. The picture crystallized. This was not a random confrontation. It was organized, deliberate, aimed at intimidating her and seizing control of her federal K-9 contract. In the quiet of the evening, she sat on the porch with Lucas and the dogs at her feet, the weight of responsibility heavy but focused. She let the tension settle, knowing tomorrow would demand even more strategy, precision, and courage. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Emily knew the stakes extended far beyond herself. Her son, the dogs, the principles she had sworn to uphold, and the message sent to anyone who might try to exploit power against the defenseless. The night closed around Cloverwood, quiet but vigilant, with Emily readying herself for the battle that had only just begun. A battle that would test her endurance, her intellect, and the lessons of a life spent in service. Morning arrived in Austin with a sharp clarity, the kind that cuts through the lingering heat of summer nights. Emily woke before dawn, the kitchen light casting long shadows across the counters. Titan and Nova appeared silently at her sides, ready for the morning ritual. She made coffee, the aroma filling the quiet house, and sat at the table with Lucas at her side. Quinn called early, briefing her on the latest filings. The appellate court had reviewed the emergency injunction request, and though the written motion was strong, Judge Philip Owens had denied the stay without hearing oral arguments. Emily pressed her lips together, counting the hours carefully, 5 days to prevent the impoundment of Titan and Nova. Every moment was precious. She drafted counter-arguments with Celine, cross-checking federal statutes on retired military working dogs, ensuring that every line was airtight. They included references to federal protections, documented certifications, and previous commendations, leaving no room for interpretation. Outside, the neighborhood began to stir, unaware of the legal storm brewing behind closed doors. Emily stepped onto the porch with Titan and Nova, letting the dogs stretch along the fence line. Neighbors waved or called greetings, some leaving notes of encouragement on the porch steps. Every acknowledgement strengthened her resolve. By midday, Celine called. The injunction had been granted. Relief was sudden, a weight lifting off Emily's shoulders, but she remained measured, knowing that legal victories were only temporary reprieves. The dogs followed her into the house, obedient and calm, their presence a tether to the stability she fought to preserve for Lucas. He watched quietly, sensing the seriousness of each phone call, absorbing lessons in patience, courage, and courage and preparation. That evening, a press release confirmed Voss's temporary leave and stated that the complaint was under review. Emily sat with Lucas and the dogs, the television off, letting the normal rhythm of dinner, dishes, and evening light fill the room. Each moment of calm was deliberate, a reminder that life continued even amid chaos. Yet Emily knew that this victory was fragile. Councilman Keller was still maneuvering, the potential for legislative moves that could override federal protections lingering in the background. She and Celine reviewed strategies for federal intervention and documentation collection, preparing for any legal maneuver that might come next. Emily called Vivian Hale, retrieving additional footage that documented previous incidents involving Voss, establishing a pattern of harassment. Every piece of evidence reinforced their case, turning anecdotal experiences into a documented narrative of targeted intimidation. By nightfall, Emily felt a measured exhaustion settle over her. Titan rested his head on her lap, Nova leaned against Lucas's feet, and the house held a fragile sense of safety. She wrote notes for the next day, planning calls, filings, and strategies to counter any legislative or judicial threats. Even in the quiet, the tension remained, a persistent undercurrent that demanded awareness and preparation. Emily understood that the days ahead would test every skill she possessed. Legal acumen, tactical foresight, emotional resilience, and the ability to safeguard her son and her dogs. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to remember why she had fought so hard, and to honor the years of service that had instilled these instincts. The battle was far from over, but Emily Harper was ready, and Titan and Nova, ever vigilant, were ready with her. Outside, the Austin morning gave way to the heat of the day, streets still quiet, but Emily knew the storm was approaching, and she would face it with calm precision, every decision deliberate, every action purposeful, every heartbeat aligned with the promise of protection and justice. The following morning, Emily moved through the house with a deliberate calm. Titan and Nova mirrored her movements, a living extension of her instincts, alert but controlled. Lucas ate breakfast quietly at the kitchen table, eyes bright but serious, understanding that today would be another step in a long, complicated fight. Emily reviewed the filings on her laptop, noting deadlines, motions, and strategic angles with meticulous care. Celine called with updates from the state appellate court, outlining potential challenges to their injunction and clarifying federal statutes that strengthened their position. Every detail mattered: timestamps, documentation, witness statements. The slightest discrepancy could shift the balance of power. Emily jotted notes, cross-referencing them with prior incidents recorded by neighbors. Vivian Hale's footage revealed patterns that suggested premeditation by Voss, and this insight began to take shape in Emily's strategy. Outside, the quiet streets of Cloverwood offered a deceptive peace. The summer heat had faded into early fall, the sun cutting clean lines across the pavement. Emily walked Titan and Nova slowly, not her usual run, observing the neighborhood, greeting residents, absorbing the ordinary details that grounded her in reality. Each interaction, however small, reinforced the community support that had begun to coalesce after the viral video. Back inside, she called Quinn to coordinate the timing of filings and witness statements. The team worked with precision, preparing for legislative maneuvers that could attempt to reclassify her dogs as dangerous. Every line of communication, every document, and every testimony had to be flawless, leaving no opening for misrepresentation. Lucas watched quietly, absorbing lessons in courage and preparation through observation. He did not need to speak. He understood through presence. In the late afternoon, Celine confirmed that the emergency injunction had been granted at the appellate level. Emily allowed herself a slow, controlled exhale, aware that this victory was temporary, yet crucial. She shared the news with Lucas gently, letting him process the relief in his own way, Titan and Nova at his feet, calm and protective. That evening, Emily sat on the porch, reviewing additional recordings from neighbors, noting the repeated behavior of Voss over years. Patterns emerged: harassment, targeting, escalation. This evidence transformed what had seemed like isolated incidents into a compelling narrative of systemic intimidation. She documented every detail carefully, labeling folders, creating timelines, building a foundation for a potential federal civil rights claim. The quiet of the evening contrasted with the intensity of preparation, the dogs resting at her feet, Lucas reading beside her, and the neighborhood bathed in the soft glow of street lamps. Emily allowed herself a brief reflection, recalling her time in military deployments, the discipline and resilience those years had forged. She knew she was drawing on the same skills now, in a civilian battle that demanded strategy, patience, and courage. As night fell, she laid out the next day's plan. Review filings, organize witness statements, prepare for potential legal counterattacks. Every step was deliberate, every move calculated. Emily understood that the fight was far from over, but she was resolute, Titan and Nova ever vigilant, moved as one with her purpose, silent sentinels in a world where ordinary streets could mask extraordinary threats. Outside, Cloverwood slept under the stars, unaware of the careful strategies, legal battles, and quiet determination unfolding behind closed doors. Emily sat in that stillness, feeling the weight of responsibility and the clarity of her mission, knowing that tomorrow would demand even more, and she was ready. By dawn, Emily was already at her kitchen table, Titan and Nova lying at her feet like two statues of patience and loyalty. The legal pad in front of her was covered in circles, arrows, and annotations. Every deadline, filing, and motion mapped out with meticulous precision. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth steady her nerves. Celine called with updates from the appellate court. There were questions about procedural timing, but nothing that threatened the injunction just granted. Emily relayed instructions to Quinn, confirming witness statements and verifying every piece of evidence had been logged correctly. Lucas came down, his pajama sleeves rolled up, eyes curious. He glanced at the legal pad but said nothing, sensing that this was serious work, the kind that required focus and calm. Outside, the neighborhood stirred to life, but the streets were still quiet, giving Emily a sense of control she clung to. The dogs stretched before her, then returned to watchful positions as if aware of the importance of the day. Late morning brought a flurry of activity, emails from residents, calls from media outlets, and notifications from Celine. Each needed a measured response, each a chance to protect her family and the dogs. Emily handled them with the same calm authority she had shown in the parking lot, her voice steady, precise. She coordinated a secure drop-off of additional neighborhood footage, ensuring that prior incidents involving Voss were documented and preserved. By afternoon, she had compiled a comprehensive timeline: calls, complaints, responses, video footage, and patterns of intimidation. This became the backbone of her strategy, the narrative that turned isolated acts into a coherent story of deliberate harassment. Lucas watched quietly, drawing lessons in observation and patience. Emily walked Titan and Nova later in the afternoon, letting the dogs stretch through the neighborhood, feeling the warmth of community support as neighbors waved and smiled. Some offered words of encouragement, others quietly observed from porches, a silent affirmation of solidarity. Returning home, she reviewed the last set of documents for the day, ensuring every line of argument was airtight. She considered possible countermoves, legislative threats, and the calculated efforts of Councilman Keller to undermine federal protections for her dogs. The sun had set when she finally closed her laptop. Titan and Nova flopped beside her as she sat on the porch steps, the fading light casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Lucas joined her, shoulders relaxed, processing the day in his own silent way. Emily allowed herself a brief moment to reflect. They had won temporary protection, but the fight was far from over. She felt the weight of responsibility keenly. The safety of her son, the welfare of her dogs, and the broader implications for fairness and justice in her community. In that moment, the quiet streets of Cloverwood felt both fragile and reassuring, the calm before inevitable storms. Emily exhaled, letting the tension slip slightly from her shoulders. Knowing tomorrow would bring more challenges, more calculations, more preparation. And she was ready. Titan lifted his head to look at her. Nova followed his gaze, and Emily felt a deep sense of alignment, a living connection that reminded her that she was never facing this alone. The night closed in around them, quiet, deliberate, filled with the kind of vigilance that only experience could forge. In her heart, Emily knew that persistence, strategy, and courage were the only paths forward, and she was determined to see it through to the end. The next morning broke cool and crisp over Austin, the sky pale with early autumn light. Emily rose before dawn, moving through her house with practiced precision. Titan and Nova followed her silently, stepping around furniture with careful awareness, their instincts alert yet controlled. Lucas appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, still processing the previous day's events. Emily fixed his collar and tousled his hair, offering quiet reassurance that they were prepared for whatever was coming. She made coffee, checked the legal pad, and reviewed updates from Celine. Emergency motions were drafted and ready for submission, additional affidavits had been collected, and every detail of prior incidents involving Voss had been corroborated by neighborhood recordings. Quinn called briefly, confirming that witness statements were in order and advising that any communications from city officials or media outlets be routed directly through their legal team. Emily moved methodically, knowing that timing and coordination were as crucial as the law itself. Outside, the streets of Cloverwood remained calm, a deceptive serenity hiding the storm of strategy and legal maneuvering inside her home. She walked Titan and Nova down Birchwood Avenue, greeting neighbors who had quietly rallied in support. Their presence reminded Emily that the community was watching and that vigilance could be amplified by solidarity. Upon returning home, she documented every detail, every call, every piece of evidence meticulously, ensuring nothing could be questioned or dismissed. By midday, Selina informed her that the appellate court had granted the emergency injunction, providing temporary relief against the impoundment order. Relief washed over Emily, but she remained measured, knowing this victory was a pause, not the conclusion. Lucas watched quietly, understanding the weight of what this meant. Titan and Nova lay near him, relaxed but ever watchful. That afternoon, Emily and Celine strategized on how to leverage the neighborhood footage and documented pattern of harassment to strengthen their case. Vivian Hale's recordings, combined with Lucas's, demonstrated deliberate targeting over multiple years, transforming the confrontation from a single incident into an undeniable narrative of intimidation. Emily updated Quinn and Celine on potential legislative moves by Councilman Keller, analyzing the timing, motives, and possible counteractions. She drafted additional statements, double-checked affidavits, and coordinated secure storage for all evidence. As evening fell, she walked Titan and Nova slowly through the quiet streets once more, letting the dogs mark the perimeter as a subtle ritual of vigilance. Neighbors offered smiles, small gestures of solidarity, reinforcing the sense that she was not alone in this fight. Returning home, she reviewed filings one last time before nightfall, ensuring every detail was ready for the following day's motions and court activity. Sitting on the porch, Titan and Nova flanking her, Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe. Lucas joined her, shoulder to shoulder, absorbing the calm and determination she exuded. The house felt safe, if temporary, a fragile bastion against the legal and social battles unfolding. Emily knew tomorrow would demand more strategy, more careful observation, and unyielding focus. But she also knew that with her son, her dogs, and her legal team aligned, she was prepared to meet whatever challenges awaited. The quiet streets of Cloverwood held their breath with her. Each step, each heartbeat, a reminder that vigilance and preparation were the foundation of resilience, and that she would not waver. Days passed in a tense rhythm, each sunrise bringing new developments. Emily woke early, every movement deliberate, Titan and Nova at her sides, Lucas quietly observing from the kitchen table. They had developed a routine, a small island of control in a storm of uncertainty. Emails and calls streamed in from Celine and Quinn, updating her on filings, court motions, and responses from city attorneys. Vivian Hale had provided additional footage, confirming repeated patterns of harassment by Voss over years, transforming isolated incidents into a documented history of misconduct. The appellate court proceedings were moving deliberately, with each day presenting both legal victories and new challenges. Emily meticulously tracked each detail, making sure every piece of evidence was preserved, every motion carefully worded. Lucas helped where he could, learning the importance of observation, patience, and integrity. Outside, Cloverwood continued its quiet rhythm, the streets familiar and grounding, masking the intensity of the battles within courtrooms and emails. Emily walked Titan and Nova slowly each morning, observing the neighborhood, exchanging brief nods or greetings with neighbors who had begun to show subtle signs of support. Their presence reminded her that the community was watching, and that accountability could extend beyond the confines of legal documentation. By midday, Celine called with confirmation that the injunctions were holding, offering temporary relief from the impoundment threat. Emily allowed herself a measured exhale, but she knew the danger was not over. Councilman Keller and his allies were still maneuvering, attempting to undermine federal protections for retired military dogs. Legal strategies had to anticipate legislative and procedural tactics. She reviewed affidavits, double-checked evidence, and coordinated with Quinn on filing deadlines. Each step deliberate, each decision critical. That evening, Emily and Lucas sat on the porch, Titan and Nova resting beside them. The boy's presence reminded her of the stakes. Not only the dogs and her livelihood, but the example she set for him about courage, resilience, and integrity. She thought of her deployments, the discipline and focus that had kept her alive in far more dangerous situations. Those lessons were the foundation for every move she made now in a different kind of battle. As night fell, she allowed herself a brief reflection. The temporary calm, the neighborhood support, the progress in court, all were evidence that persistence, strategy, and patience could prevail. Titan lifted his head, Nova followed his gaze, and Emily felt the quiet strength of their partnership. Tomorrow would bring new filings, new challenges, perhaps more intimidation, but she was ready. Lucas was learning alongside her, Titan and Nova as ever-present guardians, and the work of documentation, strategy, and vigilance would continue until the threats had been neutralized. She closed her laptop, prepared for the night, and let herself feel a small measure of satisfaction. They had survived another day, and they were ready for whatever came next. The morning light was thin and crisp, signaling early fall in Austin, and Emily moved with quiet efficiency. Titan and Nova flanked her as she stepped onto the porch, leashes taut but controlled. Lucas was already at the table with his homework, eyes alert yet calm, understanding the gravity of the days ahead. Legal updates awaited, filings, motions, and potential legislative interference from Councilman Keller. Selena called, her voice brisk, confirming additional affidavits and the preservation of all recordings. Emily reviewed each document with precise attention, double-checking dates, timestamps, and the alignment of evidence to legal statutes. Outside, Cloverwood remained serene, the ordinary rhythm of streetlights and neighborly greetings a stark contrast to the high-stakes battles unfolding behind closed doors. Each walk with Titan and Nova reinforced the subtle but vital presence of authority and protection in the community. Emily noticed neighbors watching quietly, some offering nods of support, others simply observing, their attention a reminder of the ripple effect her actions had already created. By midday, she coordinated with Quinn on emergency filings, ensuring witness statements, video evidence, and documented incidents were all ready for submission. Every word, every line, crafted with care to anticipate counter-arguments and procedural maneuvers. Afternoon light filtered through the kitchen windows as Emily updated the final sequence of evidence for Celine, confirming the appellate injunction remained intact, a temporary shield against the impoundment of Titan and Nova. Relief was tempered with the understanding that the situation remained fluid, with political and legal forces still in play. The neighborhood had begun to show subtle solidarity, small gestures, informal check-ins, evidence that Emily was not alone in her fight. She documented each interaction meticulously, knowing that community support could become part of the narrative of resilience and accountability. Evening settled over Cloverwood as Emily reviewed each motion one final time for the day. Titan and Nova lay at her feet, Lucas nearby, and the house held a fragile sense of normalcy. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to recognize the progress made. Injunction granted, evidence secured, community observing. Yet she knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal maneuvers, and the need for unwavering focus. She reflected on her deployments, the lessons of patience, observation, and discipline learned over years of service, now applied in a civilian battlefield of law and civic responsibility. Each detail mattered, every move calculated. Emily felt the weight of responsibility keenly. The safety of her son, the protection of Titan and Nova, and the assertion of principle against intimidation. She knew the days ahead would test endurance, strategy, and courage, but she was ready. The neighborhood slept under the dim glow of streetlights, oblivious to the quiet determination shaping events inside the Harper household, and Emily Harper, steadfast and prepared, allowed herself a moment of resolve. No matter the obstacles, she would not yield. The sun rose slowly over Austin, casting long shadows across the streets of Cloverwood. Emily sat at the kitchen table, Titan and Nova at her sides, Lucas quietly eating cereal, the soft morning light reflecting off the polished surface of the table. Today was the culmination of weeks of careful planning, legal strategy, and tireless documentation. Celine and Quinn had prepared every filing, every affidavit, every piece of neighborhood evidence. Vivian Hale's recordings, Lucas's tablet footage, and years of documented harassment formed an unassailable narrative. Emily felt the weight of all those months, the viral video, the civil suit, the threats, the legislative maneuvers, and she allowed herself a moment to reflect on how far they had come. By late morning, they arrived at the county commission chamber. Emily walked in, Titan on her left, Nova on her right, both dogs wearing their retired military harnesses. The room was designed to make citizens feel small. High ceilings, long tables, cameras observing every corner. Lucas sat in the front row between Vivian Hale and Quinn Donovan, shoulders back, hands folded, attentive. The chamber filled with legal representatives, journalists, veterans advocates, and community members who had followed the story. Emily took her seat, letting Titan and Nova settle, eyes forward and calm, a living testament to discipline and service. She spoke without notes, words flowing from experience rather than script, about service, sacrifice, and the bond between handler and military working dog. She recounted Lucas's morning on the porch, the viral video, and the courage required to stand firm when faced with intimidation. Every statement was precise, measured, filled with moral authority. The chamber remained silent for moments that stretched like hours. Then applause broke out, not polite or measured, but spontaneous, powerful and genuine. Lucas joined in, clapping harder than anyone, watching his mother with awe and understanding. The commissioners voted unanimously, enacting a binding resolution protecting retired military working animals from local ordnance overrides. Emily exhaled, shoulders loosening for the first time in weeks. The federal civil suit would follow, but this local victory set the tone, sending a clear message: intimidation would not prevail. Later, the federal case moved forward. With Vivian's footage, neighborhood affidavits, and airtight legal filings, the opposing attorney chose not to settle, misjudging the strength of the evidence. The jury deliberated thoroughly and returned a complete verdict in Emily's favor. The city of Cloverwood was ordered to pay damages, funding both a legal defense fund for residents affected by discriminatory policing and the Elias Harper K9 Initiative, a non-profit training veterans as certified canine handlers. Justice was tangible. Voss faced criminal prosecution for conspiracy and misconduct, the Federal Civil Rights Division ensuring that no badge could be weaponized against citizens. He was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Councilman Keller's schemes unraveled, his financial connections to the Meridian Group exposed, and his political career ended under scrutiny. Emily, Lucas, Titan, and Nova returned home, the streets of Cloverwood quiet once more. The weight of weeks lifted, leaving a hard-earned sense of victory. She looked at Lucas, saw the trust, the understanding, the steady gaze of a boy who had watched courage in action. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting the warm glow of late afternoon across the neighborhood, a quiet celebration of endurance, strategy, and principle. Emily exhaled slowly, letting the relief settle, Titan and Nova resting peacefully at her feet. Every battle had been fought, every lesson applied, and for the first time in weeks, the world felt safe again. She allowed herself a moment to just be, surrounded by family, loyalty, and justice realized. The days that followed carried a quiet dignity. Emily moved through her home with measured calm, Titan and Nova ever at her sides, Lucas navigating schoolwork with a newfound sense of assurance. The federal civil suit had concluded, the city ordered to provide restitution, and Voss was serving his sentence. Councilman Keller's corruption had been exposed, his contracts voided, and his political career ended. Emily sat at the kitchen table each morning, reviewing the success of the initiative she had established in Elias's name, ensuring veterans received training and placement in law enforcement canine programs. The routines of daily life returned: breakfast, school drop-offs, neighborhood walks, Titan and Nova patrolling silently, Lucas learning through observation and experience. Yet the victory had reshaped them all. An awareness that courage, strategy, and perseverance could overcome systemic obstacles. Emily paused one morning, watching her son throw a ball for Nova in the backyard, Titan resting in the shade. She felt a profound sense of completion tempered by the memory of what had been at stake. Every late night, every filing, every calculated step had led here, to a moment where safety, justice, and principle aligned. The house was still, filled with the quiet rhythm of resilience. A boy growing under the protection of dogs trained for service, a mother who had applied military discipline to civilian challenges, and a community finally witnessing accountability. The lessons of courage, observation, and preparation embedded themselves into Lucas, who had seen firsthand that standing firm could produce meaningful change. Emily closed her laptop, placing a hand gently on Titan's head, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Nova rested her chin across Lucas's knees, a silent affirmation of safety and loyalty. Outside, Cloverwood thrived in its ordinary life, unaware of the extraordinary victories that had been quietly achieved. Emily exhaled, allowing herself a long, slow breath, knowing that the storm had passed and that their lives could move forward with dignity intact. The morning sun reflected off the kitchen counter, warm and steady, as she poured coffee and shared a quiet smile with Lucas. For a moment, nothing else existed but family, trust, and the calm endurance of all they had endured together. The streets were quiet, the air clear, and the world at last felt right. She turned toward the camera that had been recording moments of their daily life for the initiative, and with calm certainty said, "Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video."